Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. By way of introductions, there's no new members this month. Roster's already done the roll call. So looking for somebody to approve the minutes from our January 20th meeting.
I move we approve the January 20 meeting minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Do I have a second? Arlene, thank you. All right, any discussion? Okay, all those members in favor of approving the minutes from the January 20th meeting, please say aye or raise your right hand.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. All right, thank you. So I think we'll kick off the meeting with our traditional mayor's welcome. And Mayor, I'll leave it up to you if you want to transition right into the community forum recap, or we can hold that till the end of the meeting. I'll leave that up to you.
Okay, I'll do it that way. Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for making it on a different day and a different time this time around to meet some schedule changes. And for those that are new, just a brief recap of the purpose of this group. There are so many different agencies and individuals who have some role to play with addressing the issue of homelessness in our, excuse me, in our larger community, because it's way beyond Astoria. That we felt it's very important that these folks get a chance to just come together for a couple of hours every other month and share what they're working on, what's working, what's not working, new ideas, possibly gain some efficiencies, eliminate some redundancy, and have us all essentially work better together as a team by having a greater understanding of all the different things that are happening and all the different aspects. And some of the things that have come out of this group are the homeless liaison positions. I think most importantly, that started off as a briefing that was given to us on another community in the Portland metro area, what they had done. And the group felt that it was worth investing in those positions. And so that's happening now. And we've had reports from our homeless liaison on how things are going. I think we'll probably get an update today again. But so that's one success story. And this group will continue for as long as the members feel it's useful to have this opportunity to share information every couple of months. I do want to note that I wish we were meeting in person today so that we could all shake Chief Spalding's hand. We're going to have to do a virtual handshake. Chief Spalding's last day at the city will be April 19th, I believe. So he will not be here to lead our group any longer. And I personally, I know I speak for the whole group when I say how thankful I am that we've had Chief Spalding's leadership for 4 years at least as a leader of this group, and his willingness to really be analytical and thoughtful and even-handed and listening and encouraging all perspectives to get shared to make the best decisions for our community. We couldn't have asked for a better leader. In some communities, I think some organizations would question having the chief of police leading a group like this. But this group has always fully supported the chief because they know he's kept that analytical and methodical and even-handed approach, not biased in one way or the other, just doing what's best for our community, considering all perspectives. So we've been very fortunate to have Chief Spalding, and I just want to personally thank him. And I don't know how you do a clap on Zoom, but a round of applause for Chief Spalding.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that.
Okay, you're very welcome. And with that, I'll transition into just a brief recap of the what was called the Livability Forum that was held at the Liberty Theater. There were about, I think most people here were probably in attendance, but for those who weren't, there were over 400 people there. That represents the equivalent of 1 out of every 25 Astorians. Originally, it was sparked by a desire for a business forum focused on the business community's concerns and complaints about issues related to our homeless population that expanded to make it a more fully fleshed out approach. And of course, as a public meeting, we don't have the ability to restrict it to just business. And I think we'll hear a little bit later maybe about the forum that's going to take place specifically for the business community this Tuesday at the Level Showroom from 6 to 8 p.m. Kevin Leahy made the very wise choice to hire an outside facilitator who doesn't have a dog in the fight, comes from outside. Her recommendation, Allison Hart, was to keep the temperature in the room down by having attendees submit questions and comments on written cards rather than speaking at a mic. The cards were passed down to a table at the front, which consisted of 3 persons, Kevin Leahy from the Small Business Development Center, Teresa Barnes from the Warming Center, and Janet Hutchings, who's a small business owner on 10th Street, as well as a board member of ADHDA. And those 3 people took the questions, organized them by topic. There were a number of topics about questions about Heritage Square, and those questions weren't read because it wasn't a Heritage Square meeting. It was a livability meeting, and Heritage Square Forum was actually held. Open house was the next night at the Armory on the 24th of March. There was a panel that consisted of Clatsop County Sheriff Matt Phillips, Chief Spalding, myself, David Reed from the Chamber of Commerce, Viviana Matthews from CCA, Amy Baker from CBH, and Aaron Carlson from Lightboat Services. I started off with law enforcement doing a presentation on their perspectives, as well as reviewing the many court rulings and Oregon statutes, which currently restrict the ability of law enforcement to do things that a lot of citizens said they want, like prevent loitering and restrict public camping. And so there was a lot of discussion of that. The social service agencies presented various aspects of their roles in dealing with our homeless population. The event lasted about the 2 full hours, and there were still attendees with questions at the end. All of those questions that were submitted have all been scanned and posted on the city's website, so you can look and see all the questions that were submitted. I can tell you, I personally have gotten an incredible amount of positive feedback about the forum. There's also been some negative feedback who wanted a forum that was less sympathetic to homeless persons. And again, the specific business focused forum is going to be held on Tuesday night. So in my view, it was a success. What I wanted to come away with at that forum was that there is a much increased baseline level of awareness of all aspects of the complexities of the homelessness issues. And with that awareness, then I think we can move forward with real progress and real solutions. So that is the forum. If there's any questions on that, I'm happy to take those. If not, I'll turn it back to the chief.
All right, thank you, Mayor. And that was a great recap, obviously, and I really don't have much to add other than I appreciated the opportunity, like I said at the beginning of that meeting, and we've said here in this meeting, if there's one thing I wish that I had done a better job of over the years is trying to educate the public in terms of what our challenges are. The conversation we're having here today and the conversation we had last week at that forum is a very different conversation than we would have had a year ago or even 4 years ago. Like I said, the tide has changed. The problem is still the problem. It's still significant. It's something that we as a police department have a significant challenge with, and trying to navigate where, not necessarily what one side or the other wants us to do, is navigating what's the right thing to do. And so that's always our challenge. And we know that we're never going to keep everybody happy, and we just do the best we can. And I've appreciated working with everybody here and know that we really do have a great community regardless of where we're at. And I think that was evidenced just by the tenor of the meeting. I was honestly apprehensive going into that meeting, didn't know if this was going to be a shouting match or something else, but I was very pleased at the civility of everybody in the meeting, knowing how people feel about the issue on either side of the dilemma. So I just appreciate just everybody listening and coming together and seeing if we can find solutions that at least makes everybody a little bit happy. So anyway, with that being said, I think we'll start going through our reports, and we will start off with Terry from the Harbor.
Great. I have a little PowerPoint. Can I share that?
Yes, let me give you that ability.
I can figure out how to do it.
All right, see if you can do that now. Okay, I do see it.
Great. Let's see. Okay, you can see that?
Yes.
Awesome, thanks. Hi, I'm Terry. If people don't know me, I'm the executive director of the Harbor. I use she, her pronouns. And I just wanted to do a little recap of sort of what's been happening at the Harbor. I don't think we've actually ever presented to the host committee about what's happening with domestic violence and sexual assault and homelessness. And so I just have some sort of things about what's going on at the Harbor, and then a couple other sort of things to mention about DV and homelessness especially. For those of you that don't know, our mission at the Harbor is to provide advocacy, prevention, and support to promote self-determination and hope for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. We provide a ton of services. I think a lot of people recognize us as a place that provides shelter services and only shelter services, but we do also, of course, have our 24-hour crisis line. We have culturally specific services for Spanish-speaking population as well as the LGBTQIA+ population. We have a prevention and youth outreach program, and all of these sort of combine to provide wraparound services to survivors throughout Clatsop County. Just to sort of see sort of where things have been going, I think we've been getting progressively busier since the start of the pandemic, as people sort of, I think, recognized being the case. So in 2020, we served 400, this is total survivors, not just shelter clients. We'll get to that in a second. We served 408 people in 2020 and 445 in 2021. Of the survivors that we did serve in 2020, 25% of those were actually unhoused. They either were coming directly off the streets or they had left an abusive situation and had nowhere to go back to or no one to stay with. And then that number increased slightly in 2021 to be about 27% of the population that we work with. We also have been putting a lot of effort into just, obviously sheltering survivors. At the start of the pandemic, we did actually have to decrease our capacity at shelter and put a lot more effort into motels and hotels to shelter people. So this is the number of people we actually were able to shelter. The numbers are a little bit funny because what we're seeing because of the housing situation throughout Clatsop County is that whereas our average stay used to be about 30 days in shelter, it is now doubled to about 60 days at shelter because there's just no options for people to move into. So folks are staying longer. We're not able to house as many people because we're housing people for longer periods of time. And then of course we have less capacity. And so as you can see, both years we had to turn away around 100 people looking for services, looking for shelter specifically, which as you can imagine is not great. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have seen a 20% increase in referrals from law enforcement across the board. And we've also seen an 8% increase in domestic violence cases. The other thing that we're seeing and what survivors are reporting is that there's a pretty significant increase in the levels of power control. We're seeing a lot more lethality factors in these relationships. The violence is more extreme than it used to be. And people just need a lot more support and a lot more resources. And generally speaking, I think advocates spend a lot more time with people trying to find those resources, especially around housing. So we spend quite a bit of effort really looking for places for people to live, as you can imagine. So even though the number of services we have provided increased about 25%, we are also at the same level of staffing. And as you can imagine, I mean, in Clatsop County and around the world, housing is the #1 resource for survivors. I mean, that is the thing that will get people out of abusive situations and into a better place. And it is also the hardest thing to obtain and exceptionally tricky for folks to get. Just some general statistics about housing and intimate partner violence, IPV. So we know that about 1 in 4 women and 1 in 8 men will actually experience domestic violence in their lifetime, which is a pretty staggering statistic. I think in Oregon, it's actually it's closer to 1 in 3 women. So we're a little bit higher than the national average. 1 in 4 homeless women are actually homeless because of violence that has been committed against her. So 25% of the women that we see on the streets are because they've been in an abusive situation. And then, of course, 92% of homeless mothers have experienced some sort of physical or sexual abuse during their lifetime. And that number then gets worse when folks are on the street, as you might imagine. Financial abuse is the basis of most domestic violence relationships. Most survivors who were living in a domestic violence relationship are experiencing financial abuse. So that means that either they're being forced to like make all the money and the abuser is doing nothing, or the opposite, they're not allowed to control any of the money and have never actually made any money before. And so when they leave, have no income and also don't really know how to sort of take care of all of those things, which makes it a little trickier. And then just as a sort of other thing is that we're also seeing that the risk for violence for homeless women with mental illness is about 97%. So it's just a normative state for homeless women with mental illness on the streets. Some of the barriers, this is true for everybody in the universe, I think, but especially we're seeing a lot of this at the moment. Poor rental history. So a lot of times because of, the violence that is committed in the home or actions by abusers, landlords end up evicting survivors because of the damage that is done during those abusive relationships or things that the abusers are doing, even with noise violations. So they end up with evictions on their record. If you guys can hear the construction in the background, I'm sorry about that. It's really driving me crazy. I don't know, it's bothering you. Okay, great. Also lack of income, again, with financial abuse. People who are living in abusive situations may not have ever had a job or know how to control the money because they've never been allowed to do that before. A lot of abusive situations, they're based in power and control. People don't feel comfortable with making decisions often because they just have never been allowed to before and always question sort of what they're doing. And so then being sort of thrown into the world and in the crazy housing market and not having an income and all of those things just makes it really difficult for folks. And so one of the things that we would really like to figure out is if we can have sort of longer term supportive housing options for survivors. Obviously, that's kind of a high hope, but and then people also see discrimination. Survivors, a lot of times landlords are worried that abusers will come looking for survivors and create more domestic disturbances, and they don't want that, even though it's obviously illegal, it still happens. Clearly, there are other populations that experience more barriers. I mean, we are culturally specific programming for the Latinx community. We've sort of doubled our client base in that community, and I would say 80 to 90% of the time and effort that we spend with our Latinx clients is spent on trying to find them housing. They do experience a lot of language barriers. There's a lot of discrimination just over the phone when they hear people's accents or their names may sound Latinx, and that happens. We've definitely seen that happen even when our advocates are calling. If a different advocate with a more less Hispanic sounding name calls, we get a little bit more attention. And then of course, lack of documentation is a problem. And then we also see folks in the LGBTQIA+ population facing more discrimination and just more housing barriers. And as you can see here, especially folks who are transgender, who a lot of transgender folks, especially young people, end up being houseless, but then face a lot of discrimination in shelters or are just completely turned away because people don't want them in the shelter. that's it. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Terry. I appreciate that comprehensive update. And are there any questions by virtual hand raise or shout out of Terry?
So I have a question, Terry. When you talked about not being able to find, not being able to take referrals because you didn't have housing available, is your greatest need to just have like apartments that would be available on an ad hoc basis, or is it your desire to own a few more houses that have multiple bedrooms that are in communities? I mean, what if you could have if the resources were available to have what you need, what is it you need?
That's a great question. I'd say if there were more actual apartment spaces for people to move into, we wouldn't need more shelter space, because it is supposed to be very temporary emergency shelter, right? And people are not really supposed to stay more than a month, but so that if they actually had somewhere to go. I think the other thing around moving folks into apartments, even if it was transitional housing, I think that would be great. But a lot of survivors, which I probably should have mentioned, deal with substance use issues because of coping, or because their abusers made them use substances, or just that piece about financial responsibility, or figuring out how to have that income. And then of course the childcare issue, right? So having just more supportive services, like for that first 1 or 2 years in combination with actual housing, is really what we need. And it doesn't have to be all in the same place. It probably would be better to have people sort of spread out, right?
Right. And I know that domestic violence affects people of all income levels, but most of your clients, are they people that would be eligible for affordable housing or Section 8 housing, or what income levels are you seeing mostly?
Yes, most of them would be eligible. Even if, a lot of times, even if they're coming from sort of a higher income level, it's because of their, partners. And so leaving, they sort of then end up in low income. So yeah.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All righty.
Looks like Gretchen Allen has a hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Good morning, Gretchen.
Good morning. I have a question. So if you have one spot for a woman of domestic abuse, and say she has a restraining order, she's needing to not be found, if you had one place where the person was actually, where these are the homes that we always send them to, isn't that somewhat of a problem if it was to be always one place?
Yes, that's why I mentioned that it would probably be better to have apartments around. We try and, when we use hotels, we try and keep that information confidential. And I think we don't necessarily need, it's always going to be a problem, right? Abusers can find folks. We do a lot of work with people to keep their technology safe so they can't be tracked. There's a lot of other things, even when it's not obvious where they're staying. And then also in a small community, confidentiality is close to impossible.
Yeah. And do you guys still keep the building doors locked? Because when I used to be above you,
at the office,
the building doors were always locked. Do you still keep them locked where people can't get?
No. People can access us between 9 and 4 every day. It's open.
And can you tell me what your annual budget is every year?
It is now around $1 million.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Gretchen. Shira?
Hey, Terry, I am curious about pet related resources in the community. I know that, when victims of DV and IPV are trying to leave, that oftentimes taking their pets with them can be a significant barrier, and also something that is used as a form of emotional manipulation by a perpetrator. So I've heard of other communities having, local vets in the area that will board pets for free if someone is trying to get out of a DV or IPV situation. And I was just curious if do any of our local veterinarians offer that? Are there any resources for pets?
Well, we do allow pets at shelter, and are actually working on getting some dog runs put into the backyard and some other stuff. We've got a couple grants to do that. So we've had dogs and cats and guinea pigs, I think. We used to work with the animal shelter to house there, but that got a little complicated, so we don't really do that anymore. But so far have not found a replacement for that. So if you have any ideas, yeah, because most people do have pets and don't want to separate from them.
Yeah, it might be worth trying to have conversations with just like the local like veterinarians in the area. I know that they do that kind of thing in Portland, so might be worth a conversation or two.
Thanks.
All righty. Last call on questions. Okay, thank you, Shara. Monica, updates
Thank
on
you.
ARPA and county property.
Sure. So as many of you are all aware, the county did receive $7.8 million in ARPA funds. And as previously mentioned, the county took that funding and we looked at what the federal requirements were, what the state economic 10-point recovery plan was, and then our board's strategic plan. And we had several meetings with various community stakeholders throughout the county, many of you on this call, in fact. And so there was a draft funding concept that was created, and it continues to evolve, and it's a living document, and it covers the current 21-22 fiscal year, and it goes all the way out into 24-25. Which is when the funds either need to be spent or committed. And so we continue to work on this document, and every time we do have an expenditure, we take it before the board so that way they can discuss it and then either approve or make some modifications to it. So at this point in time in 21-22, the county has provided $270,000 for navigation, emergency shelter, and other nonprofit support of those ARPA funds. And so that includes organizations such as Helping Hands, Lifeboat Services, CCA, the Astoria Warming Shelter. In addition to that, we have allocated $80,000 to Clatsop Behavioral Health Care to increase their mobile crisis response. And right now they have a sort of pilot program, because these are countywide funds, but again, trying to be able to work with all of the different cities and agencies to get things up and running. And so the first city that CBH is working with for that mobile crisis response is the city of Astoria. So the idea behind this is similar to what a lot of you have heard in regards to Cahoots. But Cahoots is a model that works in the metro area. It's not necessarily something that works in small rural counties. And so working with the law enforcement, the county, and CBH, this is the model that we've come up with. While they will be responding to those calls that come in, the concept is also to try and be a boots on the ground, kind of working with people before it evolves into a crisis situation, and building those relationships out on the streets. You know, a lot of our APD officers, and Chief Spalding can speak to this better than I can, and so can CBH. They already have a lot of these relationships, and so they know where these people are at, and whether they're housed or whether they're unhoused, and being able to just kind of check in and see how they're doing to try and prevent those crisis situations. So that's funding that will be on an annual basis through 25 as well. And then we also are continuing to provide ARPA funding to move forward with childcare, because childcare has a lot to do with housing and homelessness. And so we're continuing to work with the cities as well as other community stakeholders on a countywide childcare task force. Something else that the chief asked me to talk about, and that I've provided an update on before, but we'll just kind of let you know where we're currently at. So there's been a lot of talk about the existing jail and what the county's plans are for it. At this point in time, it is still our existing jail, and it will be until most likely October of 2022 before we are able to move the inmates to the facility that's being remodeled out in Warrenton. The county is going through a space feasibility study for being able to provide county-wide services of all types, whether it's building codes, planning, health, juvenile services. And one of the things through this space planning that has already been identified is that we are 30,000 square feet short of an immediate need to be able to provide the services that we provide to all of our county residents. And so while we go through this space feasibility study, one of the things that is being looked at is what can the county jail do to help alleviate those immediate space needs that we have as an organization to provide services. So it is also being looked at as to, is it an option for some sort of support services? And that might be a case, but at this point in time, we don't know. And we'll continue to work through our space plan and figure out where we're at from there. Something else that we are continuing to work on is the county has foreclosed properties. Most of these properties are in the city limits. And so we are continuing to look at those and work with nonprofit or private developers to see about creating various types of housing for our community. These, like I mentioned, are within the city limits. And so the county, though we own the property, still have to work with the cities in regards to their zoning requirements and code compliance and all of that. And so we have a list of these properties, and we're going to be working on meeting with developers to see what level of interest there might be to develop them for various types of housing. We also continue to work with the cities because while the county recognizes that homelessness is a county-wide problem, we have to work with the cities in an effort to provide various types of housing. And one of the things that we've been talking to some of the cities on and are continuing to work our way through all the cities is the potential of micro housing and what that might look like. And that would require a partnership with organizations such as Clatsop Community Action and Clatsop Behavioral Healthcare to provide those wraparound services for those individuals who are living in that type of housing. We continue to have conversations with all of these groups about the need for all types of housing, micro housing being a type of housing for those individuals who aren't ready to be in a sober transitional housing environment. Transitional housing being that type of housing that's getting individuals back on their feet so that they can then move into the more affordable housing and continue to move their way up. And so those are all conversations that continue to happen at a partnership level with all of the cities because we all have to meet our own governmental requirements and what we are allowed and not allowed to do. So something else that the county is working on is our annual budget process. And within that budget process, in the current year, 21-22, we budgeted $50,000 the last couple of years to support the homeless liaison position. It's a countywide position. And at this point in time, that's something that we're planning to propose to the budget committee in the 22-23 budget cycle, in addition to the ongoing nonprofit funding support that provides support to organizations such as the Harbor, Transitional Housing Services, and Clatsop Community Action. And so that's where the county is at right now in regards to trying to address the homeless and housing issue. But I would like to thank Chief Spalding. I know that he, for me, has been an incredible resource. He is incredibly knowledgeable about the various laws. And if he doesn't know, he does his best to answer my questions and to then let me know that he's going to try and find out what he can and gets back to me. And I just appreciate the coordinated effort that he's made. He works so hard for the city of Astoria, but what I appreciate as a county staff person is that coordinated effort that he tries to do with all of the city law enforcement and the county law enforcement. So that way, when we are trying to figure out solutions, we can all try and be working together so that it's not confusing, oh, well, that's different down there and that's different for the county. And so I just really want to appreciate everything that the chief has done, and he's got some big shoes to fill. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Monica. I really appreciate that. And like we've said before, it takes a village, right? Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Jerome, you have an update on the liaisons?
I do. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Excellent. I also have a little slideshow to share. If I could share my screen, would be great. But, here. Oh, my Zoom menu is covering my slideshow buttons. Hold on a second while I figure out how to do this.
Maybe click the from beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Appreciate it, Shira. Yeah, I just wanted, before I start on this quick thing, just it's really been interesting seeing how sort of desperate our plight seems at times, and then how hopeful it seems at times too. And I really appreciate this entire community, and Chief Spalding especially, but really appreciate everybody working together so compassionately. And it's so wonderful to just see people trying to find solutions that will work for everybody in our community, from the business community to the unsheltered members of our community. It's such a complex and difficult situation in so many ways, but I really appreciate seeing everybody work so hard to support each other. And yeah, so thank you all for that. I'm just, I think since we met last, the winter is just about over, and that means the kind of the warming shelters have closed out. And I just wanted to take a look at the season of the Hope Warming Shelter that our homeless liaisons did in conjunction with Helping Hands and Sunset Empire Transportation District. And yeah, of course, according to weather, we were open for 40 nights for that whole season. There were about 40 people that ended up really utilizing that for almost 200 stays. We served close to 400 meals, and yeah, made a big impact, and was proud about that. And people had some great stuff to say about it who stayed there, which is always nice to see things like that. But, yeah, I'm hoping that will grow into a wonderful navigation center as the time moves forward, and will be open again next year. Yeah, and then yeah, that has closed out. And then I wanted to share just kind of a nice story that the homeless liaison team shared with me this morning, really. At the emergency shelter, there was a gentleman who had been coming out, over and over again. It was really hard to get him to open up or communicate or connect too much. But one night, Annie Martin, our homeless liaison, set up a puzzle at the table and was just working with people. And this gentleman sat down and really engaged in the jigsaw puzzle, and they were able to connect and start to talk. And he just got passionate about it and started to share some of his story, right? He had nowhere to go, and just couldn't figure out what to do next, right? And had some legal issues that were pending, and just through that shared goal of finding ways to fit into the puzzle, it was able to talk through some of his issues. The homeless liaison team encouraged him to go to the police. He had some pending charges that he was able to resolve after spending a couple nights in jail, it sounded like. And they kept trying to get him into transitional housing at Helping Hands, which was full. But after that quick jail, he was able to connect and got into transitional housing. They were able to help him get his eye vision prescription filled and order some glasses through Lions. And and through just some of that human connection, they were able to connect him with a place to stay. And that was just a nice win for those guys. And that's really what I wanted to share. Does anybody have any questions about the warming shelter or the homeless liaison team in general? If not, I mean, we are also kind of starting or continuing an escalated outreach into the community. I'm going to share into the chat a link for a trifold with kind of program information and contact information. We're moving that around the community and trying to make sure everybody knows what we're here for and how to get in touch with us. So please, if you don't have our contact information, download that. It has some wonderful stuff in there. And thank you.
Jerome, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second. In terms of, I know you've only had a couple meetings and it's still kind of in the early stages, but on the HEART team, is there anything to share on that at this point, or do you want to just do an update at the next meeting?
I could do an update on that at the next meeting. I mean, really, we have been kind of coordinating. The biggest thing for the homeless liaison team with that is we've been coordinating with CBH to kind of do co-visits with people who are in, potentially reachable states, right? And that collaboration has been good, but it's kind of, it's still in process to figuring out exactly what kind of hooks we can get in to people to get things done. But there has been great increased collaboration from the parole department as well. And it's moving forward, but it is a work in progress.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, Mike, Helping Hands.
Good morning. Thank you, Chief Spalding. First, I want to start off by thanking Jerome, all the CCA folks, the homeless liaisons. The partnership on the warming center has been great. We're really excited about getting a navigation center started there, not only offering drop-in services, but additional bed space for low barrier shelter, which then can help transition people into our long-term reentry plan, either in Seaside or Astoria. So we're excited about that partnership. Currently, our Astoria location is fairly full. We don't have any spaces for men right now. The women's dorm, we do have a few spaces available. We've had some really good success last month. We've had 3 men and 1 woman move on to sober transitional housing. So we're really excited about that success with those folks there. We've got kiddos on site. We've got kids coming in to visit. So it's really good. People are working really hard. The Omicron variant hit us really hard at all our shelters. And so coming out the other side and having some of these successes has been really great. And then our Seaside location, we've had a few of the women move on from that location as well. They've done really well. We're excited for them. We've got folks working, people on SSI, and are also job hunting. So we've had good success there in Seaside. We really appreciate the partnerships that we have in the community, working with all of the agencies. And with that, that's where we're at right now. We've got a little bit of space, but not a ton at the moment. But we'll see how that continues to shake out as the warmer weather gets here. So I did want to close out and say thank you, Chief Spalding, for all your efforts that you've done in keeping this group organized. As someone that sits across multiple counties, I continually lift up, Clatsop County as the model of collaboration, because let me tell you, some of these other counties are very dysfunctional that I work in. So I really appreciate those efforts, Chief Spalding.
Thank you, Mike. I definitely appreciate that. And again, appreciate the partnership we've had with you and all the good work that you're doing. So thank you. Going to have one off agenda item, Ron Maxted. You are up if you would like to chat a little bit about Opportunity Village.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, last week, Viviana Matthews invited me to start a conversation about having Clatsop Community Action become our fiscal sponsorship. So that's a new thing that I'm excited about. And of course, once we get a sponsorship, we can proceed with getting a transitional model together. And hopefully, if we're meeting in 2 months, maybe we'll have something to show in 2 months. See how it goes. So that's the new thing that has been brought to us. So we're excited about that. So thank you.
Ron, just for the benefit of some others on the call that may not be familiar with this project, can you just give a thumbnail of what it is you're chatting about?
Sure. Yes. We're essentially, we started off with a presentation from Square One Villages in Eugene, which has successfully accomplished a transitional opportunity village. And so we are taking their blueprint and following it pretty closely. And we're actually following, there's a book out actually written by Andrew Heben, Heben, who it's Tent City Herbalism, Tent City Herbalism. And it was his master's thesis, but in the back of that book is a blueprint and we're following that blueprint on how to go forward, creating a transitional village. And a transitional village is a step up from a tent. It's a frame structure, and but it's not a small home. It's a shelter, and from that, the once the model is made, and we hope to then take that around the community, gaining support for the project, and then we hope to propose a pilot project that would consist of probably 12 small structures placed on a piece of property, and it would be a pilot project for maybe a season, and then go from there. And that's exactly what Square One Villages has done in Eugene, and it's been successful. They've gone on now to creating a permanent tiny home village, taking the emphasis that they got from the community on the transitional housing, and so it can step forward, progressing to possibly something larger. But that's it. Okay, thank you. Am I muted? Okay.
I'm sorry, I was actually muted. So,
Okay.
Ron, you're still on. And then Oz, would you like to give an update for us on Lifeboat?
Okay, so Lifeboat Services has partnered with Camp Rylea in order to place participants from both Filling Empty Bellies and the Beacon Clubhouse into their work program. We offer rides in our resource van, and we've placed about 6 individuals between both programs, houseless and our other participants. Filling empty bellies took on a permanent employee. This was the first of our transitional employment positions through the Beacon Clubhouse. We've collaborated with the DA's Victim Services Office and jail's pretrial release program to help individuals keep their calendars up to date. We are continually working with our participants in order to keep them informed of the rules and regulations which they must adhere to in order to continue receiving our services. And when they are unwilling to do so, or unwilling or unable, they are excluded and or trespassed from our location. Can you guys hear me fine?
There's like feedback.
Yeah.
I think Ron, you may need to mute yourself.
Yeah, somebody's. There we go. In addition to the regularly scheduled litter patrols in front of 1040 Commercial Street, we have begun a bi-weekly litter patrol of the immediate downtown area surrounding lifeboat services. We recently met with David Reed and Courtney Bangs on 2 separate occasions for a tour of and a candid discussion on how we in our community can proactively move towards meaningful solutions. And to that end, the invitation to any and all to make an appointment for a tour of our facilities and meet with us is wide open. We have installed a community corkboard in our navigation center for all to post pertinent, any and all to post pertinent information, which does not directly conflict with our infringe upon, either of our programs. We're on track for shower installation and have recently installed a new set of commercial washer and dryer. Working on logistics for overnight stays. We continue serving between 30 and 50 meals daily. Daily we provide socks, vitamins, toiletries, bathroom facilities, laundry, tent, sleeping bags, Wi-Fi, resource computers, TV, coffee, tea, light breakfast, hand warmers, clothing closet vouchers, and shower cards for the aquatic center obtained through the Parks and Recreation. Our PL box is still available for participant use. Through our continued co-located services, we help to bridge the gap by providing a low barrier, safe space for local agencies to offer a myriad of essential needs, including mental health care, substance abuse, and domestic violence resources. Our organization is in a unique position since we are the only organization which has been providing daily low barrier direct services to our houseless and underserved populations since 2014, and openly offer our insight as to what we've seen work and what we believe might help our communities moving forward. We will state again for the record that we are willing and able to facilitate a campsite and or locker spaces should a location be made available.
All right, Oz, appreciate that update. Any questions for Oz and Lifeboat Services? Okay, I don't see any hands. Okay, well, thanks again, Oz, appreciate that.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sure. Just real quick, I'm gonna share a screen here. This is the book that Ron was talking about, if anybody wanted to catch the name or the author. I actually have a copy. I've started reading it, I haven't got all the way through it, but just so you know a little bit more about what he's talking about for anybody that might be interested. All right. All right, Mayor, I'll leave it up to you if you want to chat about the transition from my role, or is that something you want to say for the next meeting?
Well, for the interim, we're planning. Mr. Estes, our city manager, Brett Estes, will be leading the meeting, and we'll wait until we have a new police chief to decide whether or not the police chief will reassume that role or whether it will go to someone else. I certainly welcome anyone's input.
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing I do want to briefly chat about is our council approved an additional police officer position, obviously subject to our budget process, but assuming that goes forward, we are going to be selecting internally. This would mean we'd be hiring a new police officer at the bottom end, but we would take one of our existing experienced police officers and having them be a concentrated focus. The title has yet to be decided, but it'll be something like community resource officer or something along those lines. This person, fortunately, we have a great partnership with CBH and looking forward to embedding their crisis response worker along with this individual to work together as a team to address many of the issues that we're experiencing. We, are really excited about this position, and this is going to be different than the liaisons that are currently working with Jerome and Susan and Viviana. It's going to be everything from working on the social service side of things to try to get people into services, all the way to addressing the things that we are getting more and more continuous complaints on a daily basis in terms of, tents popping up and derelict vehicles and those kinds of community livability type issues. Again, as always, we will always work with a compassionate approach, always work with our social service partners to, look for the best outcome as possible. But I do know that there's a lot of frustration in our community. There's frustration amongst our own officers in terms of the revolving door that we're dealing with. And so more to come on that. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that. Still a little bit in the formative stages. And as always, I really appreciate our council mayors and Brett's support in terms of having an additional resource to address the growing challenges. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? Okay. So next on our agenda, so for the members, we will do the virtual roundtable simply by a hand raise. I'm not going to go around the room and call you all out. So if there's anything you would like to share with the group for the greater good of the order, and then after that, we will then move to our guests. So any members by a hand raise? Arlene, and then Teresa.
Well, the homelessness task force started when I was mayor, and it has grown and evolved, and it's been a real pleasure to see all the changes that have been made. And I particularly want to thank Chief Spalding, because he's done just a fantastic job, and I've gotten to know him as not only a police chief, but as a really good friend. And just thank you so much.
Thank you, Arlene. I really appreciate that comment. Thank you. Teresa?
Remember to unmute there. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I want to thank Terry and Jerome and Oz. It's really, really good to hear updates from what people are doing. I feel like that, as the mayor mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, kind of reminding us of why we're all here. I think that having everyone in this group, at the very least, know what the resources are in the community is really important. So as far as the warming center, also like AKA the place in town that people can sleep, we are closed. And so I feel like a lot of times at these meetings that it's kind of like we give our updates and then we sort of leave before we get to the place where we have like the action items, like who's on what and who's doing, like where are people sleeping tonight? And so I have permission to share a lady's story. I'm not going to share her name. It just seems unnecessary, but a reminder that there are unhoused people in our community. There are families who don't have anywhere to sleep tonight. As Jerome mentioned, the warming shelters are closed for the season. And so when we leave these and we don't address that, that seems really problematic to me. And if we want this to keep being a vibrant, useful resource, then like everybody in this group at least needs to be aware that we can go out and give people snacks and hygiene supplies, but if they don't have a place to go to sleep, that's hugely problematic. If they don't have a place that they can go during the day to be and exist, then they're going to just keep hanging out downtown because people have to exist somewhere, And so I would love, again, I'm going to say this every time, like I am so happy to work with any of you guys on how we fill in these gaps in the safety net. Because what we've got now is like a bunch of disconnected bits of string. And that's really hard. It's really hard. And like to be the person who has to tell a mom with 3 kids that I'm sorry, there's nowhere that you can go. And she had gotten referred to the warming center by a host member, a local service and I'm like, well, we're closed. If they can't help you, we certainly can't. The idea was that we could buy her a bus ticket out of town. So when our solution, when the people in this room are suggesting that you call in a closed organization to get a bus ticket out of town, like we can focus on that if y'all want me to, like we're doing strategic planning this weekend, and I can be the organization that buys people bus tickets out of town. But like, I would think that we've got people with advanced degrees in public health and social work. Like, I think we can do better than that. And I'm sorry, it's a bit of a rant, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. Well said, and I do agree with you in terms of, the meetings have evolved over the years, and going from in-person to Zoom has kind of changed the dynamic, but at the same time, on the positive side, we definitely have a better level of attendance, and we do a really good job of sharing the work that we're doing. But I do agree that taking this to the next level looks like, what are the other things that we're missing? What are the things we need to do? What are the action items? And it's, similar to any time a new person comes in and takes over a group, it is always a fresh opportunity to look at new and creative ways and just taking something to the next level. And I'm really looking forward to what this group's going to do. And even though I won't be formally part of it, I probably will be chiming in. I'm still going to be part of this community. And I look forward to somebody, taking this up a notch. And, I think one of the biggest challenges for me over the past, almost 5 years is we're all busy. And, this has been a collateral duty for me. And I think on some level, this is something I probably could spend 40 hours a week on. And it just isn't realistic. Obviously, we have other responsibilities. Not a cop-out, pun intended, but I think it's one of those things that it is a huge community challenge. It's hugely important to our community, and I really do appreciate everybody that I've worked with over the last 4.5 years. Appreciate the relationships, appreciate the work we have done. You look around us, look to what other communities are doing, and everybody is having very, very similar challenges. And we all know that there's no easy fixes. We know that throwing money at this always isn't the answer either. So just tremendous challenges. And the fact is that this group is growing, and there's more and more people coming to the table. I think the collective thought process, we may make a difference here. So I'm looking forward to that. So thank you.
Teresa, I have a question for Teresa. So what exactly do you need at the warming center to be in compliance with building code to operate year round? And do you have a projected cost for all of those building improvements? And is the church willing to host you year round if you were able to operate year round?
Thank you, Mayor Jones. That's a great question. And I guess in some ways I would have to throw that back to the city. When I met with our building inspector, when I was still in the interim ED position back, almost a year ago, he told me that we would need a sprinkler system, but that we would be able to do a residential system, and had said, it wasn't like a hard quote, but it was like 10 to 15,000, get a sprinkler system. And then I apparently never got the list of the extensive list of other repairs that we would need. I was told by someone at the city that they didn't want to overwhelm me. So I found out about those right before we opened up for the season. That on top of the fact, I'm guessing it hasn't been mentioned yet, but considering what Oz is dealing with needing to have the whole building sprinkled, then it sounds like maybe we would have to also do that. So just in what I know about, and what I know that I don't know about, I think that's gone in the realm of like a $10,000 repair to what I would assume would be closer to $100,000. We rent from the church. We don't have their permission to tear apart a historic building to put sprinklers throughout. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of another one of those examples of just like, I mean, from my perspective, sort of a lack of communication about stuff. I don't, it's not less overwhelming for me to not have all the facts. So I was operating under the assumption that we just needed to get sprinklers for most of last year, and it sounds like we would need to do a lot more than that.
And I think Mr. Estes is going to weigh in. And before he does that, I just wanted to say, you know, at some point, if there's a pretty huge investment required to do that, then I think really it's incumbent on us to work, you know, with the county as well and say, well, if we're going to look at somehow getting funds to let you operate year round, is the best place where you are right now, or would that be the time to go someplace else to a dedicated facility perhaps, or a different building with greater capacity? I don't know. So Brett, go ahead.
Yeah, so Ms. Barnes, I'll have Meg Leatherman reach back out to you, but the city doesn't provide you with the estimate how much this would cost. You or the church would need to be able to be the one to be able to do that. We could provide some estimates for what it would cost, but ultimately a design professional like an architect or somebody else would be able to do it. We can be able to say, here's some things you'll need to look at as far as as an occupancy permit. And then ultimately First Methodist or your organization with First Methodist blessing would need to be able to do that work. And you're correct, the warming center, the filling empty bellies portion of Beacon Clubhouse, you know, there are some change of occupancy issues that are needed there that they're having to work through. And so I will have Ms. Leatherman reach back out to you and be able to have that communication so that you can get started on maybe getting some quotes as to what would be needed to be able to achieve that.
Thanks, Brett. And just to be clear, my issue wasn't that the city didn't provide us with an estimate. I understand that you guys do that. My issue was that the city didn't provide me with the full list of repairs that I would need. And I never heard anything about that until about 6 months after I'd gone down the train of just thinking that I needed a sprinkler system.
Yeah. So, and again, that's where a design professional would be able to do that. We can provide you some basic information, but we're not doing a full code audit as to the construction of your building. That's something that we can give you a list of items that you need to look into, but that's where your or the church's design professional would dig into that further.
And that's the information that I didn't get. Yes, thank you.
And I'll make sure that Ms. Leatherman reaches back out to you.
Okay. So just before I get to you, Bruce, I see your hand up here. I did want to mention, I noticed a few people signed in right around 10 o'clock, and I apologize to those that didn't get the notification that today's meeting started at 9. So you're coming in towards the end of the meeting. This one meeting was an anomaly. We started at 9. We did send out some reminders, but I know how technology works, and sometimes people are on autopilot with these meetings at 10. So just if you're wondering where we're at in the meeting and why sounds like we may be getting towards the end. So with that, Bruce, you have a hand up?
Yes, thank you. I have a question for Oz and Ron. Basically, I see camping, a supervised, well-controlled camping as a necessary thing in our community. And I wonder what the obstacles are to making that happen. I know you've both mentioned you're looking for a place, and I wonder why we haven't found that. It seems that there should be, and there have been good suggestions for where something like that could happen in the city. Some of it's on city land, some of it's on land that could be acquired by the city. And I'm just not sure why more progress hasn't been made in that direction. I was wondering if you guys have any answers for that.
Well, I'll take a first stab at that. The city has just, at our last council meeting for the first time, actually started to draft a list of potential places. There hasn't been any program or organization identified before now that has been able to run something like that. And frankly, the city hasn't made the decision that rather than dispersed camping, that the community as a whole prefers concentrated camping on one or more sites. So we do have an initial draft list of potential sites. Frankly, there is no potential site in the community that doesn't have some downsides. It's not going to meet some resistance. Everybody wants it somewhere else, but that somewhere else always has neighbors, whether they're businesses or residences nearby. There are a lot of criteria that people have identified when we're selecting a site. They prefer it not on the Riverwalk. They prefer it not right on Marine Drive where people driving into town see it. They prefer it not near a school or a playground. They prefer it not near residences. You quickly get to what's left. So we're in the initial stages now at the city of going through a list of potential sites and vetting them. And then we'll be presenting them to the community and asking the whole community's input as to whether they is there a place in town that the community will never get unanimous consent, but that generally speaking is least objectionable and that could be looked at as a potential organized campsite.
Did that answer your question, Bruce? I mean,
well, it helps an awful lot. I just wonder, that's the city's perspective. I know that, we've talked about this concept since the inception of Host, and this is the very first I've seen the city actually beginning to take steps in that direction. And I appreciate that. I really do, but I feel like it's taken an awful long time to get there. And I just wonder if there are things that are still creating issues beyond that, beyond what the mayor just suggested. So I don't know, Ron or Oz, if you guys have anything to say, I'd appreciate it.
Well, Oz, do you want to go first? Or
Either way.
I can go in. Okay. Well, as far as opportunity, Clatsop Opportunity Village goes, we are very carefully following the blueprint. And the first thing, our first obstacle was finding a fiscal partnership. We've been in this now for 2 years, and it's now becoming, it might be a reality if things go right soon. And the next step is to gain public support, because no one knows what a transitional house looks like. And so we're going to put one together, and we are going to get community support. And then with that community support, hopefully we are going to be looking for some site to put it. And it certainly won't be a low barrier situation, because it has to be fenced. It has to be it's a autonomous way that it's operated. And so we have to have people that are willing to participate, because there has to be a guard at the gate for security. And so there's lots of things, but first we had to get public support for a transitional housing project. And we're being very careful to follow exactly what Eugene has done, because they've been successful. And so that's why it's taking time. Okay, thank you. Us?
As far as just a simple tent site, again, we could use the example that they have in Eugene, where they have a tent site, and it's very clean and very well organized. We have been willing and stating so since I think about 2018-19 that we would facilitate something like that if we were able to find a space that we wouldn't have to fight an uphill battle to stay in. And that's basically where we're at. We have the means to facilitate something like along those lines, but we need to be able to find a space that the lynch mob isn't going to run after us. We're moving into.
Okay, Nate, you are up.
Yeah, I just had a question back for Teresa as far as what she was asking, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding. It sounds like I don't think she was asking for the city to give her an estimate. I think she's trying to figure out if the city's code enforcement for her building, what her fails are at that building. Is that what she is asking the city for?
Thank you, Nate. Yeah, I feel like that was maybe a little unclear. So just to make that, at this point, I am aware that we need far more than a sprinkler system. I had a meeting with the city last fall directly before we opened. And so I was thinking all of last year that we might be able to open more than 90 days because of House Bill 2006 and some stuff that eased up restrictions around emergency shelters. I'm still not totally clear why there's a fire code and why it limits us to 90 days. I think that's a state thing. So I think the state kind of fixed part of the problem without realizing that they hadn't fixed all of the problem. But there is a line in House Bill 2006 about applicable building codes. And so we would have to do a number of repairs to be able to exist out of our current space. So you're absolutely right. At this point, I'm just aware that we need far more than just a sprinkler system. I wasn't aware of that at the time. The numbers are I would imagine would be cost prohibitive. We have the warming center started as a temporary emergency shelter. We don't have the church's permission to inhabit that space indefinitely. We've been allowed to exist there by the church's grace, and we couldn't have offered our services if not for the church. But we rent from them. We don't own our building, and there are obviously problems to being in a church basement. Not everybody feels comfortable in a church. And our space is pretty limited, I mean, like if we were going to be doing something that was year round, I don't think that's the best spot for it. I also think this is a really great example of organizations needing to communicate and work together. I feel like, I've talked with Oz and Aaron a lot, and if they're going to be doing a warming center or a permanent shelter, I would definitely want to throw my support. We don't need, in my opinion, 2 shelters 4 blocks from each other. I feel like that a lot of what came up in the presentations was this need for us to work together and communicate with each other, and this acknowledgement that we don't have housing for people, that people can't leave the harbor shelter because there isn't a place for them to transition into, and so I think that if there is a permanent shelter, then maybe somebody that like the warming center could focus on working on transitional housing, or there's just so many different things that need to be happening simultaneously that I would want to put my support behind Lifeboat and, Filling Empty Bellies if they were able to move on having a permanent shelter or warming center, that it'd be a different kind of solution than we've been traditionally.
So Nate, to further answer your question and to provide more context, a number of years ago, the state fire marshal allowed an exemption from state fire code to have temporary shelters in spaces like church fellowship halls for a maximum of 90-day period without a change of occupancy. And so when the warming center first started, they were over in what was the senior center while the senior center, before the senior center was being remodeled, and then they moved over to First Methodist Church, and they worked with the city and the state fire marshal's office to be able to meet the conditions of the fire code for a maximum 90-day period. At that point in time, there was also a requirement per our zoning ordinance that the warming center needed to get a what's called a temporary use permit that is renewed yearly. And it was quite controversial. There were issues in the neighborhood where an RV caught on fire on 11th Street, and the neighborhood was quite in opposition at the time. The city actually held mediation between the warming center and the neighborhood. And through a mediation process during the conditional use permit, we were able to come up with a good neighbor agreement. And that good neighbor agreement was reviewed yearly at the planning commission to make sure that everyone was working together. And they were, things were going well. And then Teresa mentioned House Bill 2006. And what that did, it was a House bill that was passed that excluded jurisdictions' ability to address zoning issues for emergency shelters. And so before, we always had a yearly review through the Planning Commission of the Warming Center's permit. That House bill removed the city's ability to have any zoning control over emergency shelters, but it didn't remove building code standards. Building code standards, health and life safety concerns still were in place. And I know that Teresa was questioning last fall, as she mentioned, whether or not House Bill 2006 negated building code standards, and it didn't. And so we still have the provision that the state fire marshal's rule to allow 90-day periods for temporary emergency shelters is still in place. And so what would need to happen is if the warming center at First Methodist wanted to turn into a full-time shelter, then they would need to go through the whole process of getting occupancy for sleeping facilities in that church fellowship hall. And that's kind of the crux of the issue that's out there, that needs to be dealt with is what would be needed to be able to achieve that standard for building codes and fire code for a full-time shelters is the issue that would need to be dealt with our building code staff.
So then, is that something you guys are looking into on behalf of these shelters, for you to get an updated code list? Or are you putting it on them, each shelter, say it's the warming shelter or Oz, are they supposed to be finding out what the new building codes are?
So that's something that, again, if they're, just like Nate, if you were building a house, you would submit a building permit and the building department would review it. It's the same type of relationship. So we're able to go out there and talk and meet with folks to try and answer questions. But ultimately, we're the reviewing entity. The building departments of the city, the county are the reviewing entity for any permits. We're there to able to answer any questions, to be able to provide information and those types of things. Like electrical codes are dealt with by the county across all of Clatsop County through the county's building department. In Astoria, we do other types of permits, but that is something that I've already communicated with Meg Leatherman, the community development director, to reach out to Ms. Barnes to be able to have further communication and conversations about what could be needed to have a full-time shelter at that location.
Okay. I guess I'm just, as somebody that's trying to look out from outside in, trying to find a way for, I guess, the city and the county to both be more proactive of helping these people and not just be a review committee, but help them get that information so that it's not, because it's not like if I'm going to build a house. This is a committee that's trying to help the homeless, and we're trying to get the warming shelter up and running more than 90 days. I get that, but it's trying to get everybody on the same wavelength. And what I fear is Ms. Barnes is trying to navigate getting her building, or say, up to code, but yet then she's coming to the city and it's just a review. Am I getting this right? She's going to do this and then come to the city and see if she meets your requirements?
So first of all, I would add, as Teresa said, first of all, does the church want the warming center there 24/7, 365 days a year? There's that question as well, which she acknowledged has not been able to be figured out yet. And so second of all, we're always able to work with anybody to be able to dialogue with those things and help them out. But also, Nate, there is and as you maybe learn more about how things are working in government agencies as you run for county commissioner, you'll see that that a building department is actually an arm of the state of Oregon. And the thing is we're there to help, to be able to provide information, but we can't be the designers of things. It's something that there's somebody is a design professional, and there is a review authority that comes from the process of a building official to ensure that health and life safety things are met. And so that's kind of the relationships that's there. We're there to be able to help to provide information, but the city building official cannot be the designer. They have to be other licensed professionals under state building code.
Okay. First of all, I appreciate you throwing me in there as county commissioner, running for county commissioner. I'm actually here as a citizen first and foremost, trying to find a solution for everybody involved with the homeless issue. Secondly, I do know a little bit how the government works and that you guys are that. I'm just asking, as far as she's going, what she was having to do, whether it's Oz or Teresa getting up to code. That was just my question. I wasn't trying to say it was on the city. I'm just trying to see if the city and county can start working a little bit more together to get that aspect of helping these places get facilitated. But anyway, that's enough of that. I do have a quick question for Oz, if that is possible.
Go ahead.
My question is, as somebody that does care about this community, and yes, the homeless issue is obviously an issue for us all. I guess my point would be that not everybody is, as you put it, a lynch mob when it comes to finding a location. Some of us are just trying to make it to where it is works for everybody, I would say. So I guess I just kind of take a little bit of offense to the lynch mob comment for some of us on here.
My apologies for using those words. It's kind of felt that way. A lot of the people who have been extremely against us have never even toured our facility or talked to me personally. The most loud, outspoken people have never had a conversation with me and don't actually know what we do and every service that we provide. So that's where that feeling comes from. And I apologize. I'm not trying to offend anyone.
No, and I understand. I want you to understand, just from some of us that, like I say, I haven't toured. I hope to tour it soon. But at the same time, when I hear somebody from your side that says, "Oh, the lynch mob," then I do get apprehensive. When people are wanting to come forward. We need to break those barriers, those walls on both sides. And I appreciate what you're doing. And I hope that we can figure things out. I just want you to know, from my standpoint, hearing that on your side, that kind of puts up a wall. So I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Gretchen, hand up.
Yeah. Hearing this and listening to Brett, having built homes, having done developments with clients, part of the process is working with the city to find out what are the changes to code, what are the things you have to do. That feedback is so necessary. That's what I heard from Teresa, that she didn't get that feedback. So I guess it and that's kind of what Nate was speaking to, is what I heard. So I guess I'm wondering why, Brett, you would say that wasn't the city's job, because
that is what the city does when you're trying to build a home, is to provide the feedback so you don't get too far down the road. And that's been actually part of the problem with the city. What is driving up costs of building a home in this city is that you have architects, you've got builders, they're all expensive people. And they're having to work around the city not communicating. It is a problem that I hear from my clients who are builders, that the city just doesn't work with you. And of course, that goes back to the housing. We're having a housing crisis, and yet the city's kind of being a roadblock, it sounds like, to some of those things actually happening. So I'm wondering why they're not being more part of the process on the front end rather than just being a review, because the front end is where you're going to mitigate cost.
So I wholeheartedly agree with you, Gretchen, that the city needs to be able to be there to be able to respond and to be able to answer questions and to be able to do that. I do know, as Teresa said, that part of the discussion this last fall was Teresa understanding that House Bill 2006 negated building codes, which was.
And that was not my understanding. I just want to clarify that. Gretchen and Nate are right on track here. I can talk about Bob Johnson because he's retired. He very specifically told me I needed a sprinkler system, period. And I never got the pages of other repairs that we needed. I never thought that all building codes were thrown out of the window. So since that keeps getting repeated, I'm just going to have to clarify that. That was not my understanding. Okay,
well, fair enough. And as I said early on, Teresa, I've already contacted Meg Leatherman during this meeting, and she'll be reaching out to you. Bob Johnson is no longer the building official at the city, and so he will be working with you. And Gretchen, I totally wholeheartedly agree with you on what you said in terms of the city's responsibility.
Okay, and one more thing for Oz. This one's for Oz, is that, and also the mayor. The Liberty Theater was a start. However, the businesses were trying to come together to come with solutions. And there's a lot of meetings happening now on the side without the city, which I don't think is all productive. There's the businesses I talked to didn't find it positive. They found it a slap in the face. They found it to be an admonishment of us that we're just rude to the homeless. And Oz, I haven't seen you come and ask my problems with my business. And the fact that I was almost assaulted a few weeks ago, that we've had someone walk through our door and threaten my receptionist. Some of the issues that we have, you've also not asked us. The city does have access and maybe just that connection. The other thing is that what was left at the Liberty Theater by people who were carrying signs and the mess that was left, I think that that's part of the problem, is that mutual respect, that mutual, I too took offense to the lynch mob comment. I'm not trying to lynch anyone. I have a little sister that lives this lifestyle. And I don't consider her homeless because she actually has a bedroom at mom's and a bedroom at dad's. She chooses this lifestyle, whether it be the mental health issues. We've tried for years to help her. I personally have helped people. Remarkably, every cup of coffee I've offered to people around my business, they've already got one. So, I think it goes both ways. And I will say that the downtown, I will never understand why the downtown would be the choice, because if I was personally in that position, I wouldn't want to walk downtown and have my situation displayed for everybody in the downtown. I actually think it's very unkind where you have placed that.
So just, Ms. Allen, since you did address me as well, I'll just say briefly, yes, I totally agree with you. The forum was nothing more than a start. Absolutely not the end point, even the midpoint. And I'm very glad that Kevin and David and others are facilitating this business forum on Tuesday, which is very much focused on the business perspective. And that'll be another next step down what hopefully will be a continuing conversation amongst all of us. So absolutely, the Liberty was just a start, was not supposed to be any kind of end game. I will say, with regards to the location of Lifeboat Services at their present location near 12th and Commercial, They tried for years to find a place. They inquired of every available building and were turned down every time because landlords did not want to rent to homeless services. And that's why they ended up there. It was not the city's choice to put them there. I've communicated with both Oz and Aaron during my many visits to their facility that I would prefer they were somewhere else. And they know that. And Chief of Police and Mr. Reed and Ms. West, we've all communicated that to them. And if there's some point in the future where there's an opportunity, where there's a building available that meets their needs and they could move, that I think that would be a great thing as well. But right now they are where they are because that was the one place that that property owner chose to rent to them.
Right. And I think too, though, the problem I have is the low barrier shelter doesn't point people towards a solution. Like, I agree with Teresa that I've been on here a few times now. I hear lots of, rainbows and everything's going great. It's not going great. The solutions, I don't see solution oriented. I see more, we're just kind of going along. And to me, every solution needs to be pointing to, we had Amy Baker in the CCA, Viviana up there at that meeting, and they were saying services are available and people aren't using them. Well, why aren't they using them? They should be using them, and every shelter, every situation should be pointing to that option rather than being on the streets, and normalizing that living on the streets is okay. There are certain basic standards of a civilized society that compromise is not, defecating on the street, there shouldn't be a compromise on that.
I'm quite certain that I know all of our police officers, as well as the staff at Lifeboat Services, whenever they encounter homeless individuals, we all have the list of all the service providers and provide that and encourage them to seek those services out. That is definitely the policy, is to try to encourage people towards those services.
Well,
So
I'll tell you, $1
agree.
million at the harbor, and that's not the homeless, to serve they believe that when she put that up, it was 35 people. That's astounding. I'm actually in the process of pulling a lot of these 990s to do some of that analysis because, we're throwing a lot of money. It seems you're throwing money at one option that is counteracting the other option you're throwing money at, and they're not working together. Because if your services are actually kind of opposing each other, then the money you're throwing at it is actually counteracting each other. And that seems to be what's happening. The CCA is trying to keep them off the streets, but I don't see, like I heard here, the working together. And that's, I guess, my point is, and I'll be at the meeting on Tuesday.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Gretchen. Any other comments from guests, members? Okay. Looks like we are winding down. Just a reminder that these meetings are recorded and that we will be transcribing the minutes, so they will post it on the city's website. Also a reminder for everybody to check the city's website for the livability page. A lot of the things that we're talking about here today are posted on that site, and that's continually updated, and we will be adding new material as it comes available. Right now, the next meeting is scheduled for May 19th at 10 a.m. And so, Mayor, anything else for the good of the order?
No, good meeting, lots of perspectives. Thanks everyone for giving us your input. Look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Brett, anything from you?
Nothing more from me. I'm good. Thanks, Chief.
Okay. All right. Again, thank you, everybody. It's been a real pleasure working with you over the years. This is not goodbye. This is, I will see you again in some capacity in this community, and might even be signing on to the meetings. And so look forward to what we can accomplish as a group. And it's been a pleasure. So everybody take care.
Bye.